What book ducked you up mentally? A comprehensive guide to JavaScript programming. Decided to read The Shining. Ended up getting snowed in with my family on our farm halfway through the book and finished it before we could get out. In retrospect, I should have read it during the summer. Where the Red Fern Grows. Being forced to read that sent grade school me through a roller coaster of emotions. Night Shift by Stephen King. A collection of short horror stories. I was around 10 when I started really getting into reading, and my dad had a lot of Stephen King on the shelf, so I naturally started reading his stuff. I remember many nights staying up far too late after reading, just waiting to hear "So Nice" come from my closet. Some of those stories genuinely ducked up my young mind. Night by Elie Wiesel. There is nothing more unsettling than reading the inner thoughts of a Holocaust survivor. We need to talk about Kevin. It's the same plot as the movie, just written through letters from the wife to the husbands, and oh boy was that intense. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Blew my young mind away and really made me think about how society is organized. Go Ask Alice. I read it when I was 12. It was the first time I had read a book like this, and it shook me to my core at the end. Sad Face. It by Stephen King. I read the first chapter when I was about 8 and literally spent the next 2 weeks shivering in my bed every night until I got up the courage to talk to Dad, who went and spoiled the ending to reassure me. When I first read Animal Farm in my early teens, I was at the age where I could recognize the parallels with real life, and it ducked me up for a long while. Cat in the Hat. I was molested when I was 7 and I knew what happened. So whenever the cat said "your mother won't mind," flashbacks back to when I was 7. Misery by Stephen King. That book slowly breaks you as you keep hoping that the protagonist survives the horrors he faces. Mark Twain's autobiography, where he said, "But who prays for Satan? Who in 18 centuries has had the common humanity to pray for the one sinner that needed it most? It changed the way 14Y/Omi saw theology forever." I wouldn't say ducked me up, but after reading The Curious Case of the Dog in the Nighttime, it really made me a more understanding and open-minded person. I would say ducked me up in a sense it permanently made me realize that, mental illness or no, everyone's brain works differently, and people may have an underlying trauma or reason why they do the things they do. I read Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar when I was in 7th grade for accelerated reader points, and I haven't been the same person since. I really think Unwind by Neil Shusterman is interesting. There is a chapter in which you are put into the perspectives of the minor antagonist as he slowly gets torn limb by limb and organ by doctors. All of his organs get taken out one by one, in non-descriptive detail, until there is nothing left of him. It didn't really duck me up mentally, but I thought it was ducked up. Additional note: it even gets more ducked up when you remember that the person who is getting torn limb from limb, harvested for organs, is legally a child. The Lovely Bones and Lolita, both books I had to read for a course. I'll never reread them. Truly disturbing. The Plague from A. Camus. A Child Called It by Dave Pelzer. It's an autobiography about the child abuse Pelzer suffered through as a young child. He goes into detail about wounds/the abuse. He has a few books about it. It's probably one of the worst cases of child abuse I've ever read about. Fucked me up reading it as a young kid. Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. Nothing I've read has ever struck me with more terror than the thought of slipping through the cracks in the larger cities in the world. I hate to set foot in London for this fear, which will definitely make tomorrow fun as I have to spend the entire day there. Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. Really puts you in the mind of a twisted dude and shows a lot of other twisted people doing bad things, among others. Pedophile. Child prostitution so a family can eat. Saving this whole thread. Probably passing on the JavaScript one. I hear the plot is thin. I still think about The Girl on the Milk Carton, which we listened to as a book on tape when I was a kid back in the 90s. Pet Sematary. The minute I knew Gage was going to die, I started feeling gross about reading the book. I know it is as good, as in disturbingly good, as any of King's novels. But for some reason I just couldn't bring myself to read beyond the funeral scene because I knew what was coming. Nope, the devil. Before that I had never thought of a version of God that was good and powerful but imperfect. Schindler's List. As if the book wasn't enough, our teacher made us watch the movie. Not to mention, as someone who kicks theirself for forgetting something that seems completely obvious after the fact, reading how he recalls name after name that he couldn't remember to put on that list until said list was sent killed me. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley was a book we were required to read my sophomore year of high school, and I reread it again a few years ago, and that book is still ducked. I read of Mice and Men when I was 8, on my mom's recommendation. The ending was too much for my little brain. The Giver, I freaking hate that book. Messed me up when I had to read it in middle school. I still shudder at the thought. Maybe not as impactful as some of the others on here, but The Perks of Being a Wallflower was the first time I suspected I may need help dealing with my mental illness. The Long Walk by Stephen King. It's about a group of 100 teenage boys partaking in an annual program called The Long Walk, in which they walk cross-country at a minimum speed of 4 miles per hour. There's a set of rules, and if they get 3 strikes, they're out of the walk, meaning they get gunned. Everyone will keep waking until there's a winner. The book's about 400 pages long, but it's very interesting despite just being about walking. It's more of a psychological horror than most of King's books, and it messed me the duck up when I finished it. Like, goddamn, I might just be weak-minded, but duck, it's a great read. Would recommend. Beat the Turtle Drum by Constance C. Green. I read it multiple times when I was 10/11ths, and my sister did too. We both love it, but it's heartbreaking. It's about a girl losing her sister, and because we loved each other so much we couldn't even conceive of that happening. Flowers for Algernon. At first it wrenched at my heart with pathos for Charlie's struggles in life in a way that assures my choice of working in mental health, but then it starts to accelerate in subtle, almost imperceptible ways, with an improved spelling of this word, that word, punctuation previously unseen, his rise in intellect matched only by its foreshadowed meteoric fall. My reaction when he re-enters Alice's classroom was the same tear-jerk caliber that hers was at seeing him again. I highly recommend it. Rebecca, by Daphne du Maurier. I read that book when I was 15. When my English teacher handed out a book to each student based on what she thought we'd each enjoy. A lot of students got duplicates of Starship Troopers, Lord of the Flies, Gone with the Wind, Little Women, Animal Farm, etc. When my turn came, she handed the only copy she had of Rebecca to me, and said, "I think you're the only person in the class who will be able to really see past the shocking moments to the story within." That book fucked my 15-year-old mind up. What with the murder and gaslighting and incest. But God, it was good. Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. The way he portrays a man that is essentially a pedophile that is also disturbingly charming, and he makes you feel almost sorry for him. I read it multiple times, and every time I marvel at how beautiful the writing style is, but the book itself is deeply, deeply wrong. A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. Very depressing and took me a long time to get through. I remember crying so hard near the end. No book has ever made me feel such emotion before. The Bible, especially as interpreted by the insane evangelicals I grew up around. It's amazing how it can magically agree with any thought/action/opinion you like, while damning any you dislike to hell. The Jungle, by Upton Sinclair. Truly horrifying the way people were forced to live and work. Ready Player One wasn't so much the book that ducked with my head as it was the realization that I lived in a world filled with people that thought it was even a mildly engaging story. Animal Farm. Some people are more equal than others. As a young black kid in the South, this resonated. A fantastic, not well-known book called The Time Traveler's Wife. It follows a man who spontaneously and uncontrollably jumps through time from both his and his wife's perspectives. About halfway through, he starts to learn small details about his death. He gets accidentally shot, and finds out there's no way to stop it. He even jumps through time to it and witnesses it from a third-person perspective. And then his legs get broken. So he knows he can't run from it, and just has to watch the dead approach, knowing he'll die. One of the creepiest ends of a book I've ever read, especially since the rest of the book is so fun to read. 10 tenths. Would recommend. It's literally my favorite book of all time. We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. Excellent example of an unreliable narrator. But, yikes. Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. An Indian history of the American West. Hard to be proud to be an American after reading how the Native Americans were treated. I'm not sure of the name of this book. Maybe someone here could help with that. But I read it at a time when there was a lot of heavy life stuff going on. And I just remember it hitting hard. The main character was a girl who had her brain or consciousness put into the body of a gorilla. And she went to live with gorillas on a preserve of some sort. She was struggling with things. And I think she was identifying more and more with the gorillas that she was there to help with. After she turns her back on humanity and goes to live fully with the gorillas. It's a faint memory from 20 years ago. But if someone could think of the name of this book so that I can reread and straighten some memories out, see things through adult eyes and put some things to rest, that would be cool. Fahrenheit 451. I read it as a teenager and it completely wrecked the way I saw the world. I'm rereading it right now, and I see so many parallels to today's society that it makes me sick.